thank you so much for joining in to the podcast today, or if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching with me today. Drew T. Jackson with Drew T. Jackson Coaching, Speaking, and Training. And so excited today. Got a special guest that I get to interview, established business owner, operator, entrepreneur many years ago, made that journey, that entrepreneurial journey. And so I have Jeff Edwards with me. Jeff, would you mind just go ahead and say hi to everybody?
Good morning. How's everybody doing out there?
That's awesome. Well, Jeff has an international business with multiple products and maintenance services for his clients. Jeff won the E-Star Award from the Department of Commerce earlier this year. What an exciting ride. I mean, just a little bit about you and kind of what you do. You travel and speak extensively in Latin America, Asia, Africa on the subject of lightning and surges and mitigating their impact on profitability. So kind of helping these companies out. So after graduating from Texas Tech in Lubbock, you spent 9 years in telecommunications sector before founding Energy Control Systems in 1987.
Yep.
That was 1987. And you sell these surge suppression systems. Okay. Right. Okay, everybody, let's not lose you right there. Jeff can simplify it. And to those who need to know what he's talking about, they know. You guys understand. Those out there that know that product, your ears are perked up right now. Jeff can help you out. But what I'd like you to share with us is, obviously you didn't start there, in 1987, you didn't get to traveling the world and all that kind of stuff wasn't happening then. How did you get from there, when someone came into your office and presented something, to where you are today and how your business has grown?
Well, Drew, that's a question that you start to get pretty often as you get as old as I am and as we are. But it was honestly almost by accident from what was introduced to us as a lightning and surge protector, or transient suppression, which back in 1987, to me, a transient was a bum down at the bus station. Okay?
Yeah.
We knew nothing about that. And but the product was presented from being in the telecom industry. I understood the need, but had no clue as to really how to take it to market. So we picked up a single product, began to talk to people about lightning protection, slowly got interest and realized that we weren't the only ones in the world that didn't know or understand what transients or lightning could do, and began to add product here and a product there to address what we call the power quality industry. It's more than just lightning, and it's more than just battery backups. It's an entire industry that revolves around providing quality electricity. And as the internet began to take hold in the 90s, we were one of the early adopters on getting the website up, and that started to produce a significant amount of traffic for us from overseas.
Okay.
And people inquiring about what we did and our product and how it could help. And so 95, 96, we began to do a little bit in Mexico, a little bit in Argentina, a little bit in Peru. And before we realized it, we had 10 or 15% of our gross sales were in international. And,
wow.
At that point I thought, let's just see how this thing rolls. And, I'm a poster child for not having the 5 or 10 year plan. So I hope your listeners don't, take that to heart, because it's probably not the best way to go. It just seemed to work out pretty well for us. And, as the business began to grow here stateside, I had a vision of having 40% of our business being international. We blew by that a number of years ago, and now we're sitting at about 75% on international sales. We picked up the distribution for a company specifically in South America.
Okay.
That company was bought out, and we began to have some issues, and so that's when we introduced our own product line for the world, and began to realize that, hey, this looks like it's going to work pretty well, and we've just built upon that and capitalized upon that, and we find ourselves as you mentioned, a second time winner of the export award from the Department of Commerce for continued export growth. So we're really proud as a team on what we've been able to accomplish.
That is fantastic. I noticed that it was the second time. That's amazing. That's just amazing that you've had that kind of growth and the Secretary of Commerce presented that award to you, correct?
Mm-hmm, that is correct.
Yeah. I mean, golly, that's a huge, huge honor. That's amazing. Well, I love the journey. I think anybody who's an entrepreneur or sets out or has, these ambitions to be an entrepreneur, you got to embrace the journey and enjoy the journey. And cause it's a journey, and for me, hearing that journey is so exciting. We made this decision and we saw this opportunity and we set this goal and then we blew past that goal. And, we recognize, wow, there's a lot to kind of what we're doing here. Was there a turning point in your business or a moment where you thought on that journey where you thought, wow, we have something special here. We have something interesting that we got something going on here?
Yeah, it probably was not too long after we introduced our own branded product into Latin America, which was 2004.
Okay.
And we'd made some inroads and some pretty good distribution into Colombia and Peru and Chile and Argentina. And it started filtering back to us from some of the major manufacturers or suppliers in our industry that this energy control systems company, they're all over the place, and we began to get told in 2005, 2006 that, we were the number one product in Latin America.
Wow.
Companies that are 50 times larger than who we were. And so that made you feel good.
Yeah.
Feel like we got a product that is far superior, made in the USA. Our distributors take a hold of it and run with the vision, change and improve their lives. And that's just opened the door to the whole world for us. And it's been a progressive thing to see where we were to having major companies trying to do, corporate espionage on us to find out.
Oh my goodness.
Individuals saying there were different people trying to get into our heads and find out what we were doing. And so that was quite amusing over the years. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is something that I hadn't even really thought about, and to experience that's got to be, I guess it's a rite of passage of some sort.
Yeah.
You're on their radar and they want to put money,
they're on their radar.
Oh my goodness.
We've made a few, as you say, enemies over the years with some of the other people in the industry. It's most industries are. It's a small circle, and people know you, and they find out who you are, and so yeah, we don't get Christmas cards from some people. Some of the business we take.
Oh right. Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's funny. So if I'm doing the math, so you're 17 years into the life of your business where you say to yourself, because you said 1987 you started, 2004 is when you're like, nah, okay, we really got a hold of something special, something, we're number one in the industry type thing. That's amazing. I think that's sobering, and that's a great realistic understanding of you've got to have a long game approach to this thing. It's not a flash in the pan type business. When you say I'm going to commit myself to start a business, you got to be in there for the long haul.
Especially when you're in sort of a niche industry like we put ourselves into. There's some major players now, but in the throughout the 90s, it was still a niche industry, and so we're carving a place out. And I purpose never to borrow money to grow the company, and so could we have grown faster? Possibly, but it's a pace we were comfortable with.
Yeah,
and we have long tenured employees. We don't have high turnover. We've created a family atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so it just grew at a pace to where we achieved some consistency in the mid 90s as far as sales and income.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really 2004 or 5 when we skyrocketed after we realized we've got the best product on the planet.
Yeah.
What we do, and people come looking for you, and that's pretty refreshing.
So you were one of those overnight successes, 17 years in the making, right?
Exactly. We're the best kept secret in Fort Worth, Texas.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. As you were talking about creating a family atmosphere, I think that's something that maybe the entrepreneur isn't thinking about. They're thinking about sales. They're thinking about growing the business. They're not necessarily thinking about that culture that you develop in your organization. How did you develop that family atmosphere, as you said? Or what are some things you thought contributed to that?
I think probably because we started out small, it was just myself, a partner, and one salesperson, and we all were acquainted with each other, and so that with the smallness and intimacy of the office environment, it was a necessity to get along.
Yeah,
or we'd have killed each other. And so we had an employee here, an employee there, and keeping it with that atmosphere of, the customer comes first. We can sort out everything else.
Yeah.
And we began to realize that now there's rarely a week that goes by where somebody doesn't comment, "Wow, thanks for getting back to us. Thanks for taking care of us." And so that's been what we've seen throughout our whole 30 years is take care of the customer. Yeah. Sort out the orders, money can sort itself out. And, especially when you start hiring salespeople, as you know, we all get territorial.
Yeah.
But, if you keep the culture of one of openness and honesty and transparency as much as possible, those things can work themselves out. And thankfully, we've seen that over our lifespan so far.
That's great. Keep the main thing, and the other stuff, we'll figure it all out. We'll take care of everybody. That's, and they trust you. They obviously, if your team didn't trust you, they wouldn't trust you when you say that, at your words. And so you've built that trust, and your character over time has shown them that they can trust you and know that you're going to follow through. I think that's huge when building your team.
And it's strange. I get some strange feedback or comments from people when they ask me certain growth numbers and as far as the finances, and I really don't know. I don't know what sector produces X number of widgets for whatever, because I don't run the business that way.
Yeah,
I run it by numbers. We run it by growth. We watch the numbers, but I feel like if you create an environment where people enjoy what they're doing, then they'll do well.
That's good.
We've never had a policy of micromanaging. It's to the point now where I couldn't do that if I wanted to, but but we just believe in creating an environment where you go after it. And if you don't like what you're doing, no hard feelings, please go somewhere and find some place that you like to work.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to enjoy what you're doing.
Yep.
That's great. Well, as we were having lunch last week, I do personal growth training, leadership training. Personal growth is just a big part of my life and what I enjoy doing, and and who I am. You mentioned that you had taken a negotiations course, and so I was just wondering how has personal growth factored into where you are today and kind of your journey?
For me, it was more along the side of industry knowledge, because I'm not an electrician. I'm not an electrical engineer. I got a business degree.
Wow.
And so for me, I had to start just from learning what an amp and a volt was. I mean, all I knew about electricity, you flip the switch and the light would come on.
Yeah.
So, or it was supposed to. And so mine was gathering knowledge of the industry in different sectors and electricity, and understanding some of that inner workings. Combine that with, some of the negotiating courses, and, sales management, project-based learning and understanding, and listening to some of the Chester Karrases of the world and whatnot, and Brian, there's Brian Tracy.
Oh yes, yeah.
Some of those guys that help you at least build a base to where you can communicate to other people.
Yeah.
So, a big part of our business is communication, and we try to make it in such a manner that it brings interest and doesn't bore people. And so those are just natural ongoing things that I personally try to be familiar with, is listening to other people make presentations, learning and incorporating and personalizing, and then adapting it to our industry.
That's great. As you were talking, the thought came to mind about negotiations, and you're in Asia, South America, Africa. Could you peel back the curtain maybe a little bit and just share how negotiations in other countries differ, or even just communications, how they differ between here and in those other countries, and maybe the learning curve for you on that, if you can think of anything offhand?
Oh, well, yeah, there's a huge learning curve. I think the first thing that you have to be cognizant of is wherever you're at outside these borders, it's not America. And they're not going to operate the same way. They don't think the same way. They don't do things the same way. And, being attentive to the environment, whether it's in, Santiago, Chile, or Buenos Aires, or Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam, a little background research on the culture always assists, because you can't just go in like an American, drive hard and get business and go home at 5:00. It's relationship building, which I think we could learn a lot of in America.
Yeah.
Because, Latin America, our distributors there, for example, we are just like a family. And you develop a relationship with the distributor, they've got the relationship with the clients. I have to allow them to create the business. So we develop the relationship, and I've been to their weddings, I've been to their child baptisms, been to ordinations for the different families, and so when we gather, it's like a family reunion. But I can't take that same thought there and work it in Asia, because the people are obviously totally different in their culture and mindset.
Yeah.
There are places that we go where the questions get real personal real quick.
Yeah.
And as an American, you can take affront to that, because, they're wanting to know intimate things about your life and your family and your marriage, and you're just kind of going, where's this guy coming from?
Yeah.
But it's not rude. They want to develop a relationship, and until they feel comfortable with you, they just don't do it. And so it's, the first, if you're going to go international, realize you're not over there. You may be an American, but you're not going to do business the American way. You're going to do business the African way. You're going to do business the Malaysian way. That's the only way you're going to do the business. I think more potential failures happen because Americans don't realize that we're trying to grow a business overseas. Yeah. They fail miserably and say, yeah, it's impossible. No, it's not impossible. It's difficult. But I did it. And if I can do it, then people a lot smarter than me can make it happen. You just have to be attentive and be aware.
That's great. And you're constantly learning, like you said, put in some time, doing a little bit of research. And then what I'm hearing a lot of is your adaptability, your ability to go into a situation, read the situation, and relate to the people as they want to. I was listening to Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he said, he makes this illustration. He says, I love peaches and cream, or strawberries and cream is what he says in the book. But he said, fish love worms. And so when I'm going fishing, I use worms, not strawberries and cream, and exactly. It's that same idea of, you know what, this is what my folks in Asia, how they like to relate. This is how my folks in South America like to relate. And I'm coming in, I'm not putting the onus on them to adapt to me, but I'm going to be a leader. I'm going to be proactive, and I'm going to adapt to them and meet them where they're at and build a relationship. And
exactly.
I think that's fantastic leadership is what that is. And personal awareness. That's great. Well, share with us something you're working on right now in your business. What you're looking forward to, and kind of where you want to go, and what's going on with that.
Well, as I mentioned, we've got two different sides of the company. We've got the state side, we've got the international. State side, we're continually trying to work on our visibility. And so this past year, we're starting a website redesign. We started doing blogs and white papers to increase our exposure, and we've seen a lot of good responses from our monthly blog post. And so we're going to expand that this coming year and increase the number of videos we do on YouTube and communicate that way with insights or putting them into the website. Internationally, I think our biggest opportunities for growth this year, we're looking at moving into Europe.
Oh,
people say,
wow.
"You're not in Europe." No, the door hasn't opened, but we've got some companies now in the UK and in Poland, for example, that they see something different in what we've done and what we do and how we approach the market. And we've been on the one magazine already in Poland, where they're about to do another article on us first of the year in electronics magazine. So we're excited to be able to bring in our world, some culture change to what is looked upon as the icon of the electronics world in terms of industrial applications. Because what we do is different, and it's like trying to swim upstream like the salmon do or the trout do. That's what we do in our world, and so it's pretty exciting to see the possibility of what we do being adapted to the European market. So we'll see how it goes, but we're excited about the first 2 quarters next year. See what happens.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, I'm going to have you on a year from now and just see how all that is blossomed and grown, and we'll have to do an update. That's exciting.
Yeah, we hope so. We're looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, would you share with the listeners how they can connect with you, how they can find your website, and any other way that you want them to connect with you so that they can find out more, and if they are in in need of your services, how they can find you?
Certainly. Obviously, we have a website, and you can go online and find us at ecsintl.com, and that'll lead you to all the different products and services that we have. Phone numbers are on there. Email is on there. If you contact me by email, you can have my personal cell phone number. If I'm on the other side of the world, I may not answer in the middle of the night, but I can be found and tracked down. And communication is real key to us, and so we're pretty open about folks being able to communicate with us. And so you're always going to find somebody here answering the phone, USA time, 7:30 to 5 every day. So
that's great. I'm going to put your information in the YouTube notes so that your website and how they can find you on the web and all that kind of stuff, and the numbers and everything that are on your website.
Awesome.
Make a note here. And then a couple of rapid fire questions, funny questions. You up for it?
Okay. I'll try.
All right. This is easy. What was the last thing you watched on TV, and why did you choose it?
Madam Secretary.
Okay. And why'd you choose it? Or did you choose it?
No, I absolutely did. So, it's fun to watch the inner workings of, and compare to what we think is real life versus what goes on TV and those types of scenarios with the, Secretary of State, and knowing some of the people I have to deal with. It's always intriguing to me to see how they interact with people and doing international diplomacy, which I have to find myself doing quite often sometimes.
That's great. That's great. All right. Next one. What were you like in high school?
Pretty much reserved, a head full of hair, not long down the back, but reserved, had a few close friends. Wasn't one of the popular kids who ran around with the crowd, but we had our own good old boys, and that was it. Played a little soccer.
Okay.
Or as we call it, real football.
I was going to say, you can probably connect with the international world with soccer right there.
Well, yes, you have to know soccer if you're going to be overseas anywhere.
That's great. All right, here's another one. A 6-year-old child asks you if Santa Claus is real. What do you say?
Absolutely, he's real. I don't think he's not going to fit down your chimney, but he's absolutely real.
There you go. What would your pet say about you if we asked for a reference?
Does he live here?
I don't know. I don't know. Do you have any pets?
I don't, but if I had a pet, he'd probably ask. I've seen him ever so often, but I'm sure he lives here all the time.
That's good. That's good. All right. And then one of my favorites is, would you rather fight a horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
A horse-sized duck. The bigger they are, the harder they fall.
There you go. There you go. I love it. Hey, that was a interview with Jeff Edwards. That's fantastic. Jeff, thank you so much for being willing to come on and do this. And you can connect with him in the show notes. I'll have all his information there, and seek him out. Check out his blog. What a great resource to learn and see an entrepreneur's journey. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye now.